Before we start this video, I wanted to pass on the message that the lead programmer of all the great 2000s Castlevanias like Order of Ecclesia and Aria of Sorrow, who is also the director of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. He is, of course, STRforSHUTARO, and the whole Castlevania fandom has been coming out on Twitter with the hashtag STRength4SHUTARO, written like the statistic, of course, in the Igavanias. And it's been really moving, actually. I really just recommend heading online if you're a moment, if you can, to check out what people are sharing. There's merch, cosplay, creative projects. If you have things of your own to upload, I really recommend adding your voice to that. Otherwise, just reading everybody's thoughts and gratitude and kind of filling the world with positive vibes is, I think, a very good idea right now. Koji Igarashi came out and said when the news was breaking that due to being the lead programmer, I mean the only programmer that is credited on like Wikipedia, you can consider a lot of these games to be his works. That includes Roten, all the, Dominus Bundle games and all that kind of stuff. It's all him and it's his work, and he was very much taking the helm as the director of Roten 2. So it's a very uncertain time for the team, but I think the most important thing is that we put out positive vibes for him and his whole family, everyone in his life, and all of the people affected by this right now. It's been a very moving moment and also fun. I learned from reading some of his responses to things that he still thinks of Miriam and Shinoa as his daughters in a way, and that he actually, this is trivia, made Miriam less of a cool type character because Shinoa, the cool Shinoa, was still such a big presence in his heart during the creation of Roten. So I really do recommend before long heading in, checking that out, and sharing whatever you can for his support. Hello everybody, welcome to No Script Thursdays, or as I like to call them, Metroidvania Mondays. This is my somewhat long-awaited video on Tales of Kenzera ZAU, not a pulse, not the initial reaction video to the trailer that I think brought a number of you into the channel, but a big, juicy discussion of the game. It's a cold, comfy October of the soul. It's rainy outside. I am drinking tea and gathering my thoughts here, and I've just been filled with feelings about this game for a couple days, getting ready to finally put this out. Basically, if I were to do a proper review, then I don't think that review would come out until next year, and at this point, I don't have enough passion for getting my words to like that fine edge that I like to get them to for a review. Like, I'm not looking to make a punchy, quick take on this game. I feel like it deserves a lot more time and thoughtful discussion, because it's a bit of an interesting mixed bag. It's not mediocre in a forgettable way. It's kind of an average game with some incredible elements and some really stumbly elements, but the incredible stuff is so incredible that I really want to get my thoughts out there. I know some of you have been waiting patiently for this, and this is just kind of the best format for it. So no point rambling now. We have the whole night to fill with thoughts about this game. And I am going to be breaking it up, as you'll be able to see in the timestamps, into a section on action, exploration, and puzzles. This is the most nitty-gritty mechanical part. Spoilers, this is the most critical section. This is going to be a lot of going in on stumbling blocks and that kind of thing. I ordered it like this because it gets much more positive after. The second section is more one step back, like the world, music, messages, characters, that kind of thing. And then the third section should not be too long, but that is the spoiler section. Do not touch that. That is an orange Asian murder hornet. That is a blue poison dart frog in the rainforest. That will ruin your experience of this game. I probably made it sound really tempting there, but if you've ever seen one of those fucking animals, they are really scary. But genuinely, there's a no spoiler section, or there's a no-go spoiler section, which you should not touch because it will ruin the story. But I did want to include that. Then at the end, I will talk a bit about where it stands in the bigger picture, how I feel about it generally, overall thoughts at this point, having done one playthrough and let it marinate for a while, and how it compares with the other Metroidvanias, put it in that context that we love. But before we start for real, opening disclaimer. I am well aware of the racist, vitriolic hate campaign against this game, and also its creators. I've seen plenty of stuff about that. I've been following them and seeing them deal with it, and holy shit. I see it as an anti-black gatekeeping movement of the game space, using faults in the game as a weird faux justification to call its creators slurs, and do all of this ridiculous stuff that does not need to happen to anybody in any space. Games don't have to be masterpieces to belong, to have a place and not be chased out of town with torches. And for people to be excited about them and have them come out a bit mixed does not justify this. My criticisms are meant to show that this is an ordinary game, faults and all, just like any other hyped up mixed bag before it. I can list numerous examples of similar games that did not have their creators put in such a position. Using any of my criticisms as ammunition against the creators violates my wishes and is a disgusting, revolting thing to be doing with your life. Anyhow, so, this game has some pretty good combat. One of the first things that I jumped on that I thought was just really cool about this game was the mask system. If you are new to this game, basically, there's an easy toggle that lets you switch between a close combat mode and a ranged shooting mode. They have a really cool thematic identity. It's mask swapping, but it also goes a bit deeper because they're the sun and the moon. But then it also goes a bit deeper because they represent all these different things in the universe, and also you get to see them, as I mentioned in my Pulse video, link popping up now probably, you see them like in some kind of like comic book movie? No, it was a movie that was being shown in a comic book. It's all very framed. Anyhow, they're a big part of the culture of either just the fictional framed world of Kenzera or also Amani. They're like a fictional thing in Amani. Anyhow, like both the characters that, or I suppose the concepts that are being embodied by these masks are a part of the world. But in this section, I'm going to be talking about the gameplay applications. And yeah, last time I probably just said one is slash, one is shoot. Now I have a lot more to say because gameplay-wise, I think they must be the biggest strength of the entire game. Basically, I am like really legitimately interested in playing Devil May Cry and Kingdom Hearts now, because those two games were listed as major inspirations for Tales of Kenzera. It's a fun game to pick apart the inspirations for, by the way. They've listed a lot of them, and it's pretty easy to trace what's where. The first thing I think of when you put those two games together is action, but specifically like chaining combos, and maybe a more frantic action, which is a fair way to describe the game. Both masks have a lot of inputs per second. I suppose it ends up coming out feeling something like the amount of inputs per second in Smash, maybe a bit slow, but it felt, pretty similar to me as somebody who's played a lot of that game. that game. Basically, you are doing a whole lot of attacking on, to be honest, like getting this out of the way, not the most diverse cast of enemies. It's not like a glaring flaw, but the main point is you fight them a lot. So you're fighting these enemies that aren't terribly diverse. Each one has its own role or whatever. But like, in a way, I kind of feel like I could be fighting a punching bag and it would still be fine. I wouldn't say that these fights feel like fighting a sandbag because there are numerous pretty good techniques they use to sort of demand you stop and re-engage them in one way or another, which is pretty effective. And the point of what I'm trying to say with all of this is that the game has a whole bunch of fight rooms, which I think is more Kingdom Hearts than DMC. I haven't played DMC, but I've watched a good amount of Kingdom Hearts in my life. And I play Days, most of Days, and I know that has, fight rooms where you do a whole bunch of fighting. Like, you get into an arena, and you gotta fight the Heartless. Is this work for Kirby Forgotten Land? Got its ideas, maybe? I'm not sure. And maybe I am actually mistaken, but either way, the point is combos, right? So, there's air combos, specifically with the Sun Mask. You have weak and strong hits, Super Smash Brothers. My very limited knowledge. You can get them in the air pretty easily. I mean, I just booted up a new save for B-roll, and I was immediately using 3-hit string combos to finish, and using ground to air strong attacks on the Sun Mask. I'm particularly interested in the Sun Mask lately because I very much neglected it during my first playthrough. It just kind of looked like watery mashing to me. I'll get a bit more to what I mean by watery and mashing later, because it's a strange combination of things, but staying on the most minute that I possibly can, the Sun, yeah, combos, slashing, strong, weak, strong attacks are different in the air. I believe you can do a down air and a neutral air. Like, I believe if you press down, it's different. Yeah, it totally is. I haven't fully explored the combo system, to be honest, but like, even just using the fundamentals and even using it as basically a supplement to my moon mask, it's pretty fun. And devoting myself to it just this evening while I was prepping, I started to find the depth where, like, I think you're going to see footage at some point of me just doing my basic string over and over again, because I realized that there's a cool timing mechanic in there. And the timing mechanic is one of the things that, again, keeps the sun and moon shockingly fresh. Switching to the moon, I can hear that noise in my head. I can't make that sound. I need to have, like, wooden vocal cords. Switching to the moon, you have a feature that is one of your first unlocks where after you spend your ammo, there's a set amount of ammo before you have to reload of moon energy blasts, you will have your bar refill, but there's a point on that bar where if you hit the timing right, you get an instant refill, but more importantly, like super golden shots. And this is really tight, right? Like this is some of the incredible stuff I'm talking about. This is really, really fun. And it's so intrinsically fun to get the golden shots that I would just run around and enjoy the backgrounds and shoot my ammo out over and over and hit my timing to get the golden shots and then shoot them out. I mean, the visuals are good. The sound design is excellent. It's just very impactful. Really just like, it's like bullets. It's truly, truly wonderful. So that was my bread and butter. And I found something similar. I haven't pushed it very far, but I only now on my kind of B-roll file have found that the sun also has almost like a reverse Metroid Dread system, where after using each attack in the fire sun move string, you get a golden flicker. It's kind of awkward. It's actually very much the opposite of the golden flicker counter system in Metroid Dread, where if you're unfamiliar, an enemy will give you a quick moment marked by a golden flash to press your counter move, and that's like the cush button. If you get that in that timing, you're making money. You're good. You're very happy. This is the opposite, where after you do your swing, you have a sweet spot for extending your swing. And it genuinely took me a couple minutes to even notice the difference. I had to like stare at it. I think now that I've gotten good, I can appreciate the difference, and it does get even more satisfying when you add the additional hits to the combo. So it's basically an IOU on how good the sun mask is. I'm pretty optimistic. That if you devote yourself to it, it'll get better, which goes into the skill tree system. It's not the skill tree of even Ori. I've looked at Ori's skill tree. I haven't played Ori, but I've studied it for science. And Ori's going to come up a lot tonight. I've been studying this game and Ori, and I'm writing a review for Imp of the Sun, and there's just a ton of Ori DNA all over, so I've been familiarizing myself. When I picture that skill tree in my head, it's these long, long, long chains of things, and this is definitely not that. It's much shorter, but there are also shorter skill trees. For example, Imp of the Sun is a skill tree where you're going to get every skill eventually. It's just your choice if you want to get the slide before the strong up air or whatever. This is different. I think you could completely neglect either Sun or Moon and get further into the one that you spec into, or at least get further faster. When I played, I didn't get the final upgrade for either because I was splitting, and the game was totally fine to play, but I am probably going to try to neglect Moon as much as I can, which is going to feel terrible, and try to get to the final upgrade of Sun. So, you know, there's that degree of freedom. It exists, and I think that if you are the type of person to want a huge variety of freedom with your skill trees, I wouldn't just hear the word skill tree and start drooling with this game. It's there. It is in fact a fun system to engage with. I like how you charge your skill points for it, have through discoverables, half through hitting enemies, which is a good balance. I think those are two good ways to fill it up. They're very rewarding, even if what you get isn't always super exciting. Again, the verdict's kind of out for... Is it out? Is that what it means? The verdict has not yet arrived for me. I think there are some upgrades where it's like, whatever, but then you put it all together and you use it constantly, right? And I think you can feel the improvement. There are certain ones that are flashy, certain ones that aren't. It's a bit here and there, I don't know. But I think the skill tree is definitely secondary to the intrinsic fun, because I got pretty much two of the best upgrades right off the bat during this play session. Like, the first one you get is the ability to get that timed recharge with the golden bullets. And then for some, the first one you get is those linked Metroid Dread sparkle continuations I was talking about, which, if I didn't paint a clear enough picture, if you get the timing down and you press at the right time, which takes a little bit of waiting and a tiny little leap of faith, not mashing, waiting for the spark to appear, it comes out faster, it's stronger, and I think it has a different visual, like, gold effect and a nice sound effect. So it's very meaty, and most importantly, that combo does lock characters in pretty well. So you can very confidently, I think my favorite part of focusing on Sun this evening was I knew that if I got the 3-hit combo started, I would finish this enemy in 2 combos, that enemy in 3, or so on and so forth. So I think the Sun does have some good stuff going on for it. I just didn't really explore it in my first playthrough for a reason I will go into right now. So when I first played this game, almost like a side note, I brought the darkness slider so dark because it said slide this darkness slider so you can only barely see the symbol, and I did that, and it made some areas of the game annoyingly dark, but it also made the character portraits really cool. So briefly I thought this game's issue is that it's too damn dark. Now I'm back to a normal brightness. It looks more like it does in the trailers. It's like not a problem. It does, however, have a different visual problem, in my opinion, or at least my experience, because I feel like the camera zoom is a little bit wonky for fights. That sounds like a really minute criticism, but as I've been kind of alluding to, you do a lot of time fighting. There are enemies that spawn just on the road as you're walking, but there's also fight rooms. Like, there's little areas you're trapped into where you have to battle. And in those rooms, it's got this distance where I do kind of get frustrated with the fact that it's a 3D game. By and large, I love that this is a 3D game. It adds a lot to my collection of 3D, 2D Metroidvanias, and it just does a ton for the minute-to-minute game feel. But I feel like I can't appreciate the really, really nice and detailed enemy designs. I don't know, something about how they are presented here, I feel like I can't get a full read. I don't know if it's the angle that they're facing me at, or if it is this camera distance thing. But basically, I've been describing a combat system where you have a lot of control. You have hard attacks, light attacks, air attacks, ground attacks, combo chains, sun mask, moon mask, charges. There's also super moves. You're always in control of something very minute. You always have a lot of control, but, and this is a big but, it just feels a little bit too zoomed out to the point where, like, I can't really get into the action. I can't really focus that well. I remember the enemies based on their general designs and their patterns, but it's hard to, like, really see what they're about to do before they do it. Maybe this is a me thing, but, you know, DMC and Kingdom Hearts, they don't have this issue of being side-scrollers. This game, I think, really could have benefited from some kind of dynamic camera of some kind. Maybe I'm mistaken, but one that zooms in a little bit when you're fighting somebody. I just feel like this would look so good closer up. Like, really, really great, or even over the shoulder or something. Not that I want an over-the-shoulder camera, that sounds like such a headache to design a whole game around. But, when I'm playing it, once I get into the fights, it's a little mashier than I'd like, and I think that may say something about my relationship with Sun Mask, because I didn't neglect Sun Mask entirely. You have to use it, but when I used it, I would just walk up and go like, why, till they were dead, basically. Throw in a strong attack, here and there, why don't you? So you can have this control, and it's not unplayable. It's not as bad as the fundamental game-alteringly annoying issue I have with Imp of the Sun's combat, but there is a degree of like, man, this combat is so intricate in theory, but what I'm doing, I can't really see. Like, I think I partially prefer Moon Mask because it's easier to read my attacks because they're ranged attacks. With Sun, I couldn't always make out every little thing. Now that I'm using the properly timed sequence, I may find that this gets mitigated and I don't care so much, but my first time through the game, I felt like once I was using Sun Mask, I was just kind of slapping my arms. I feel like I was just mashing. It was just like these close range attacks, which is really unfortunate. I do not mind it so much for exploring, but yeah, in combat, it's just like, what's that enemy doing? I can't see. And God forbid you die because you can't see that they're starting up an attack. Oh my god, there's just like a volcano that I'm just like gonna poke gently as we go through this section, which is that this game made me so mad sometimes. I will say right now, I've seen that they have patched and modified a lot, and I've already liked what I've seen from the god-blessed nerf to spikes. Spikes were the most annoying thing ever. Spikes can be in platforming, they're especially prominent in the optional parkour challenges, which I might get to later, I might not, but there is a need to bring those up. You just die instantly on spikes. So spikes are a big deal. And there were a lot of times where it was like, fine, I guess that happened. I got to a very frustrated place with this game. Not deeply angry, not truly like, I disagree with this game, but like a very physically annoyed state where I was very into the action, but also just like it felt slippery enough that I just kept feeling like, oh fine, I guess that might as well happen. And there are some times, not a lot, but there are some times where that's an issue in combat because of this camera situation. I think it's worth dwelling on the fact that I get so frustrated with this game sometimes because I think it ultimately comes from one of the game's strengths, one of its really big strengths, which is the game feel is incredibly good. It's intermittently terrible, but it's primarily so good. Like, the stuff I was talking about, okay, let's add a whole new layer. I mentioned that the golden bullets feel good, but there's so many other things that feel good. Like, aiming feels great. When you're using the blue moon blasts, you have a great 360-degree radius for shooting, and you can jump in the air and re-angle your shots, which feels great. So, one of the depths of the game is that you can shoot up close, you can do a cool backwards slide and keep shooting, you can jump and shoot, you can go up onto a ledge and shoot from cover, you could jump off of the ledge and be really high in the air and shoot. And this does get even more emphasized by some of the better upgrades, like maybe my favorite one, or one of my favorite ones, the spear. The sun and the moon both have a throwable upgrade. One of them is the stone, the freezing stone from my pulse video, which feels great. And another just excellent layer of control is that you can just straight up freeze enemies with that. That really slows things down and establishes the moon mask as the cool out, slow down, bringing the pace of battle down to make it more manageable mask. But then the sun has a throwable spear that I think has a lot less impact on combat unless the damage is really high. There were times where I did click it for maximum damage because of a boss fight, but I wasn't aware that it was primarily for lots of damage. There might actually be a way to make it set things on fire. No, I think I'm mistaken, but anyhow, the point of all that is that, wait, is it both or is it just the sun sphere? I used the freeze so many times. Does the freeze not stop you in midair? Well, if the freeze doesn't stop you in midair, the sun spear allows you to stop in midair with a very slow, realistic descent and do your 360-degree aiming. It's a fairly late game ability, but it is a great way to balance out the combos of the sun moves. You just, you need some distance, you get out of there, you hop, you can jump in the air, and you get the spear out, and you can threaten this really decently big damage. I think you've got 3 spear throws per recharge, and it just feels amazing. I was taking a closer look, and the design on the upgrade projectile spear is amazing. It's actually really, really, really good. Side note, I've been spending a lot of time lately thinking about just kind of comparing all the Metroidvania games that I have, I've been thinking a lot about protagonists, but also weapons. Like, what games have the coolest swords? What game has the coolest spears? There's fewer contenders for cool swords than you would think among these games, but there's no denying that I think the spear is the coolest spear. The main attacks, the heavy and light, I mentioned in my Pulse video, are these two short spears that you hold close to the base. But then the throwable one is also like a somewhat small and very point-focused spear with like these really cool holes and gaps in its design. It's just a very cool move overall. I quite like it, even if it had less of an overall impact on the gameplay than the freeze move, which is like a, you know, goated one. It really feels amazing to use. It feels so cool to have all of this frenetic combat stuff and then pause it. And if you think I'm done, nuh-uh. I think one of the ideas they got from Kingdom Hearts and Ori is you do like a nice spin when you jump, especially in the freeze or the moon mask. You do a nice, gentle, elegant forward roll, which looks very Ori, but might actually be Metroid or Sora. I don't know. You do a circular spin, like a little tornado of fire with your fire mask, and they're beautiful. A huge part of the game that is unlocked from the very beginning is the air dash. It's also a ground dash. It's kind of just the dash, and that's very pretty, and it feels really good to do. And when you combine those two jumps together, you get really, really satisfying parkour movement stuff. I guess it's as good as a time as any to mention that. One of the ways that the game does difficulty is you have optional platforming sequences. They're very clearly marked. It's a very established thing. If you go off the beaten path, you might find them, and they're always very difficult, and they ramp up in difficulty, and they always give you a charm to modify the gameplay. And this is one of the biggest IOUs that I have, because I really didn't use them very much. I started to get so annoyed by the platforming segments, even though I was pretty confident on the first handful, that I just didn't want to bother with them anymore, and it might be a lot easier and more approachable now that the spikes have been nerfed really well. But that means that, yeah, I didn't have a lot of the charms. That could go a lot further for modifying things. There was a decent amount of freedom, even in the early game ones, like pushing enemies into walls kills them. That sort of jazz. I was just remarking on how that sort of thing pretty much gives Momodora 3 its whole identity, and it gives replay value, so I really have to leave an IOU on that as well. That could be an untapped depth of the game. That could be very fun. And you know, you can really appreciate that anything that gets added to combat is that much better when you put it into all of these combat rooms over and over. But the parkour itself, it feels so good to jump and get around. It feels really nice to find a weird way to get up on a platform an alternate way because your moves feel decent together. Once you start adding more and more abilities, they don't always feel as good as the others. There is a late game, like second air dash, a directional air dash, that's really good. It's one of my favorite ones, but it has a little bit of jank to it. Then, God, what is there? I mean, there's another one. There's definitely another one. Some of them are just situational. It's a bit tricky. The upgrades are a bit of a mixed bag, but by and large, it starts good and stays good, and running and jumping always feels really excellent. Intermittently made terrible by not agreeing with how the spikes are laid out, which I'm being a bit harsh on for the fact that I know they were just like blanket nerfed and modified en masse. That's a very big change. But it's one of the biggest things where, oh man, this game's so good. Like, I feel like ZAU, like I'm running, I feel amazing, I'm in his body, this is great. Man, that feels like shit. Holy crap, why did that just happen? But yeah, combat, running, jumping, it's really, really nice. It really, really brings you in. So what is it that you're running through that makes this feel so nice and natural and embodied? It's the visuals. It's visual assets, my man. It is the objects with collision that make up the world around you. Yes, it is the visuals of Tales of Kenzera, and I think they are pretty dang awesome. They're one of my favorite parts of the game. In a way, I think they are emblematic of the game as a whole on multiple levels, but the level that we'll engage with them here is that they definitely have their splotchy areas, they have their messy areas, they have their patches that don't look that great. Some of the backgrounds obviously look a little sloppy, but holy crap, do the good areas look good. I mean, I could rattle them off now, but the pool of tears, once you get all the tears juicing in the main area, is incredible. The atmosphere is amazingly rich, but the majority of where you're going to be is kind of just nature, either outdoors or caves. Very, very naturey game, and it's just amazing. I think it looks great. If it's trying to be a 3D Ori game, I think it's wonderful. There's so many little details. The color looks delightful. I guess, come to think of it, the art style is really awesome too, because it feels a little bit rugged. There's a good amount of details. Maybe it would be like kind of an ideal 3D Zelda style for me. Like, it feels like an adventure game, which I'll talk a lot more about later, where you're really feeling nature. You're out there. It's stylized, you know, it's definitely stylized, but it's got enough detail that you can immerse yourself in it, and I think it's very rich. I think what matters looks so good that I don't care about the background. It looks better than Pokemon Legends Arceus, I'll tell you that much. That's not even art styles, you know, it just has so much more detail. It's just wonderful. It's not even that much shorter, is it? I'm not going to open that up. But I think it looks truly delicious. Running around is amazing. The areas are wonderful. I suppose this is a bit jumping the shock. In section 2, I'll talk about the areas themselves. But, you know, by and large, they are very naturey. Maybe I wish there were more of the moody, creepy purple areas. But they both look good. They both look good. There's lush, alive, naturey areas. You have to have a drinking game for me saying lush. I'm like actively trying to avoid drying it up before I make my final statements at the end. There are very, very... I'm not gonna say it again. There's those areas. And then there are darker, spookier caves, which have a really nice, just melancholy, fresh... Not fresh. Don't waste it where you don't need it. They're dank. They're mushrooms. They're not fresh. Water, mushrooms, bioluminescence. Really good bioluminescence. And it's all rendered nicely. And then the character models, I think they look delightful. I really, really love them. I could picture them being a little bit divisive because they really have a lot of expressiveness. I think that they have kind of separate eyes from the rest of their faces in the way that Kingdom Hearts and Skyward Sword do, which some people really do not like, and they kind of hit an uncanny valley thing for them. But if I'm comparing those 3 games, this is definitely the least uncanny valley. I think they look spot on. There are brief moments where I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of is giving Kingdom Hearts, but I think these are the best ones. I think there's just something about the style. The eyes are like bigger than ever in any of these games I'm thinking of. They are not mannequins. They're not Final Fantasy XIV mannequins. That's one of my least favorite art styles for 3D games. That's part of why I don't even like 3D games that much, is they're just not expressive enough, but there is almost an anime sensibility here, even though you would probably not rush to call anything about the face design anime, due to, like, there's not anything extremely out of the ordinary. I suppose you would call the fashion and the hair and stuff like that kind of like a whatchamacallit, like the Crom Fire Emblem, like a fantastical realism where it's like believable. It's not like spiky red hair or anything, but everything is, you know, given a bit of a style to show character. Either way, it doesn't seem super outlandish, but it's very, very expressive. And I think that's incredible. There's not a huge amount of characters, so they get the models looking really good. You know, there is one little girl. The little girl's model, I'm not as much of a fan of. Her face kind of puts me off, if I'm being fully honest. That's the one. That's the only one. That's why I have this observation. But oh my god, no. ZAU looks amazing. His mom looks amazing. The Kalunga model is really good. Yeah, no, I think it looks fantastic, and the clothes are great, and there's so many details to appreciate. There's so many little details to appreciate in the character designs that, it's rich. This is where you get into the A-tier stuff. This is where you get into the, like, best in the genre type of stuff that this game is really speccing into. But it plays right into the game feel, so we drop it here. Now we have to get into maybe the biggest problem with the game. I would go so far as to call it a structural problem. The game is very repetitive. I hasten to compare it to something like Zelda or Dragon Quest because on those adventure games, you have a lot of ground to cover. It's understood that there's a formula. When you get to a town, you discover the problem, and then you go to the dungeon, and you fight a boss, and you solve the problem. It's very formulaic, but it takes a certain nuance to pull that off, and I think this game is lacking the nuance. It's very obvious that you're repeating the same objectives ad nauseum. It is fun. I just said that it's fun. It is definitely really intrinsically fun in that Nintendo way, but every single area from the beginning to the end of the game is primarily, but not exclusively, made up of push the block. This, it only has one. I mean, I haven't done the hard sections. There shouldn't be any block parkour. There are block pushing puzzles, which as the recently appointed headmaster, the hell am I? The director of the Metroidvania puzzle department and the director of the Metroidvania puzzle department's puzzle task force, I am insulted by a game that makes all of its puzzles be pushing a block. It's true, pushing a block is a puzzle. It is a type of puzzle, but you will genuinely have your immersion broken by getting to an area where it's just, holy crap, we need to open the door. There's a block. Could you push that block for me? It's just the blocks are a bit much. I have to admit the irony complaining about these when I am living through the firebombing of my heart in Tales of Echoes of Zelda Wisdom, wherein the only puzzle is bed. the only puzzle is get up or get across, and the answer is always bed. I'm aware of that. This really isn't as bad as, it's not a game-breaking issue, but you will start to, oh, sorry for the mic, you will start to notice this. You get to an area, you push the block. It gets to an interesting application in the final area, but that also super pissed me off and felt almost insulting because I was just pushing block, and like, you know, Zelda had blocks. Zelda has blocks, I admit that. It does not give blocks a free pass to be in every single puzzle that you have. So yes, there is block pushing. Then there are more interesting ones where you have to explore a small chunk of the area to find 3 levers. This is fun. This is probably the meat of the game, is walking around areas. Oh, sorry, I hit the mic again. Climbing up areas. Sometimes there's 2 different ways to get to a switch. Maybe there's some enemies to fight. It's basically, okay, we're at a door, we gotta open the door, go crawl around here, and find the things. This is the biggest kind of Metroidvania design for me, because it's true that you're searching and you're doing action, but it really doesn't feel like you're putting your nose to the ground and exploring the world. It just feels a little bit disposable. That is the meanest word I have for these games. It applies in varying degrees, but in both this video and my Imp of the Sun video, I'm trying to establish a sort of subtype of Metroidvanias inspired by Ori that attempts to make you feel like you're on an adventure. And this comes at an emphasis on action and momentum, and a de-emphasis of crawling with your nose to the ground. Crawling with your nose to the ground is, in my opinion, a really essential Metroidvania element. It's one of the things that makes Super Metroid fun. You keep your nose to the ground because anything could be bombable. Every damn room stops you because you have to stop and sniff around for the bombable wall to get to the next room. ZAU does not do that. Ori does not really do that, but ZAU especially does not do that. It's much more like a Dragon Quest game where you walk through an area. If you stopped and checked every individual part of the room because there was an incentive, it would be a very long adventure. You wouldn't have that sense of moving through a big, grand, open area. So there is a genuine trade-off here, but on the side of, yes, I'm running through an area, I'm running to get 3 puzzles, and I'm not thinking very much about it. That's kind of the essential thing here. And Zelda dungeons, if you've watched like Boss Keys, have a similar thing where you have to stop and keep your nose to the ground and think about every route you're taking in the Forest Temple. You don't have to do that so much anymore by Wind Waker, and you certainly don't have to do it in Skyward Sword. You just go down a hallway and you trust that the hallway is going to take you to the right place. every single hallway will take you to the right place in Tales of Kenzera. Like, if you're in an area, it is highly scripted. It's linear, you know, it's very linear. And linear doesn't always actually mean that the map isn't full of things to explore. It really doesn't. There's plenty of challenging setups for that, like Symphony of the Night begins very, very linear, but there's reasons to keep your nose to the ground. And I think these adventure games start to lose that. The map is not one that you want to memorize every inch of, because there's no reason to memorize every inch of it, and it's not fun, and it's not what it's designed for. These are areas that you move through as a tourist. You just travel, you keep your velocity, and that's fun. That's fun. That's what adventure games feel like. You're moving, you got momentum. It feels great. It feels excellent here. But it is very counter to what you usually want in a Metroidvania. I don't deny that this is a true Metroidvania, but, you know, it is really that Ori flavor. It's that adventure feeling. It's that sense of nonstop momentum that makes it very different. And ultimately, the map does not feel like one where you have everything memorized. I literally only remember landmarks from when I'm replaying right now. It's like, yep, I remember this beautiful pool. I remember the bridge. I could not in a million years tell you how they connect. It's really there. And that builds to backtracking problems, but I'll be honest, it doesn't get that much worse than that. It genuinely discourages backtracking, which I'll talk a bit more about, as you could probably picture from what I'm saying. The crux of these adventure games is you don't want to backtrack to an area that's really big and wide that you weren't paying attention to, you know? I'll talk more about that later, but yeah, you get the picture. These sections where you go looking for 3 of a thing, I mean, it's always a switch. They are fun, but they are very much where the wheels kind of come off any sense of exploration. Like, it's just action. You're just crawling and jumping. It feels good. In a sense, you're doing a kind of Metroidvania thing because you're crawling around and using your powers, but it's very simple. Sometimes you will get an alternate version of this, which I think is pretty fun, which is kind of a forced parkour section. There was a bit of jank. This was one of the things that pissed me off. There's a bit of jank in understanding it, but basically you set a timer and you have to follow a pulse of electricity through a parkour section and arrive at the door before the pulse does. And this is actually really fun. It did get into the annoying territory because, you know, you can picture it. There's spikes, you have to race this thing. The camera's not set up perfectly, so you might not even know if the door is open or not. I actually didn't understand that the door was like already open. Or what does it do? It's open until you get there. I thought that maybe you had to get there right when the spark got there and then the door opened. I couldn't see the door. I didn't know if the door was open or not, so you can kind of see how that went. But I'm actually very positive about these because the parkour is the strength of the game. The puzzles are not. The puzzles are just not. And again, I'm going into explicit detail here because this is the bread and butter. If it's not an enemy room, it's one of the things I just described. Maybe I'm forgetting one? I mean, sometimes it's just like getting around the area and then opening a switch from the other side to open a door, but it is literally, oh my god, it is like you get into an area, you run into a door, you do one of these 3 things or 4 things to open up the door, you get to another boss room, you get some story, excellent juicy story, and then it's like, oh my god, Kalunga, god of death, please give me guidance. ZAU, if you're to become a good shaman, you have to go find these 3 levers. Oh, damn, I would never have thought of that. I never could have ever imagined that. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. And it is repeated ad nauseum. But I will genuinely admit that this is an angle, you know, it is an angle. I think it's a little bit immersion breaking because you can see, oh, of course, I'm doing this again. But it gives you momentum. It's pretty much brainless, and it sometimes really plays into the parkour strength, so it is kind of fun. I do get into a groove. It's a game that can put you in a good groove, and nothing about this breaks up the groove, so it's kind of just like watery popcorn eating. Not watery popcorn, but it's a watery adventure. It's not super rich in detail. It goes down easy, and it's a bit like eating popcorn, but that builds that feeling of getting deep into the adventure. It builds and it builds and it builds as you go through room after room and area after area and get story beat after story beat. There is a value to this momentum, and I see that, but it's so obviously repeated. So the final part of this segment, and actually my recording session, because this late night of the soul has gotten just a bit too late, and now I need another one tomorrow night to finish the video. You guys are eating good, unless I lose my steam and have like nothing to say tomorrow for the next 3 segments. Is the bosses and relatedly the chase sequences. So I've figured out that the chase sequences are a bit of a divisive part of Ori. I've watched them. I've seen people complain about them. The gist is that you get dropped into an escape sequence or a chase sequence from like lava or a boss, and you literally don't know what's coming. It is ultimately a showcase of how fun the game's movement feels, and that's true here. But you don't know what's coming, so you die over and over and repeat it. I can see the value in that, but enough people don't that they made an update to skip it. So I'm not going to be too harsh on this now. The most mad I ever was at this game was a chase sequence. I was red hot mad. I think it's again because I was enjoying myself. My brain was off. I was just in the moment. It was pure sensual, like sensory. It wasn't sexual. It was just like sensory. I was feeling it. I was immersed. I was in the moment. And God, this chase sequence was just endless. I was furious. That sense I mentioned before of like, yeah, this might as well happen. Up to 11 for this. Just every little thing hurt. Just, it hurts. It feels like you're banging your head into it because you're so immersed. And all of a sudden, oh no, fuck you. Like there's a hitbox there. Again, these are skippable now. The spikes were nerfed. They might be fun. I bet they're really fun on a replay. I think that's the point probably, is that you do it a bunch and get better. And as like a classic Vania Mega Man defender, like I gotta respect like the death grind. It's fine. You're not losing resources. It's not even that time consuming. It's just infuriating. So yeah, those are a thing. I could see them being a turnoff for people. It's just kind of walking this thin line of like, it's kind of the best part of the game because it's like fun action using all of your moves and you feel great when you pull it off, but it also hurts. So I don't have a lot to say about that except for that it exists. And yes, I was mad. I was so mad. I was losing my mind. And I think it's also because I felt like there was an issue with, what was it? It must have been visuals. It was a little bit hard to follow the boss. This was the second major boss who you fight after the chase sequence. And maybe you have to redo the chase sequence every time you fight. I don't know. I was so in it. That could have been the case. I literally don't know. It was a decently involved boss fight, and there was a degree of randomness in how it chased you around this big room. And I remember just being like, whatever, this may as well happen. I was like mad. I was so mad, and I was resigned to just my torment, basically. I think that was kind of a camera thing. I don't remember. There are moments I really should have unfortunately articulated them better or got my notes down better. There are moments with all of the bosses, not as bad as some games that I'm working on a review for right now. The bosses are really cool, really dramatic, really cinematic, really beautiful, very distinct, very cool, exciting bosses. But I do think there was a bit of jank. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want to like smear this game if there wasn't, but I do remember being frustrated. Maybe it's similar to the enemies where it's a bit hard to read the moves that are coming out, or maybe some of them have slightly unfair feeling hitboxes. It's just kind of another IOU for like, I think something's iffy there, and if so, it definitely hampers the experience, but they're very cool and they're very impressive looking. I think even the bosses have a little bit of a claymation feel to them, which maybe the enemies also have, but if so, it doesn't come through extremely strong. I mean, shit, is this the right section? The enemies look amazing. I'll just keep saying that. They're incredibly cool. Like, if you look at their menu sprites, okay, this is definitely for tomorrow. Wow, I can't believe this was my session for the bad stuff. This was super fun. Tomorrow's all the good stuff. All the enemies are really beautiful. In fact, I might talk more about the bosses when we get to story stuff. And yeah, it was cool, it was fun, I definitely felt challenged. I think maybe the second one was a bit too annoying, but I didn't feel that way about the third one, so that's a win. And I loved the fourth one, for numerous reasons, but yeah, I think I was frustrated. But all in all, it really comes down to, man, I can't believe how much I didn't get bored of a game that repeats the same super menial objectives for opening up doors, and the same format for 3 very cyclical, similar arcs of the story, almost like a parable. I'll get more to that later, but almost like a rhyming story. Everything really rhymes after itself, whether it's the gameplay or the story beats. It feels like a story built of repeating parts intentionally. But it was all of this, and I even said that like it was hard to see the enemies sometimes, but I didn't get tired. And this is the main point for this segment. I didn't get tired of it. By the end, I realized like I don't just want to check off this, backloggery completion and move on. I want to keep playing this even though some of it's getting so frustrating, because I want to keep playing this game. And I'm excited to replay it and have less frustration ideally now, because the game feel is so good. And I love running through it, and I love kind of brainlessly exploring the world with no expectation of going back for 100% completion, which is officially going to be something for the next sequence. And it just felt good. It felt good to be in there. It intermittently felt terrible, but even though I was repeating all this stuff, it felt great. And it really comes down to the combat. I mean, I could almost reopen the wound and start reopen the floodgates and keep talking about combat. But everything I talked about like 20 minutes ago, all the different little things that feel good, all the depth, I want to go play some games like DMC and Kingdom Hearts, because I want to know how their action doesn't get boring. Like, I think this is the least boring action in the genre. Like, it's exciting. Usually with Metroidvanias, the excitement comes from having a million options, but in this case, it's just a somewhat small pool of options that are very deep and fun to use. I don't think they're as deeply fulfilling as an Igavania or something. It's different. I think Igavanias are more of like how Metroidvania combat should be held up to, because I think RPG style combat where you have a million options, or like Symphony of the Night where you have sub-weapons to choose from, and you have spells to choose from, and you have multiple weapons with secret attacks to choose from, and also items to choose from, that I think plays in more organically to being a Metroidvania. This could have been plopped into almost any game, but as it is, it's really fun, and it's incredible for how simple and repetitive the game is that I never got tired of doing it. Thesis. Whoosh! And just like that, you have been transported to a second dark night of the soul in October. Fun fact, I found out that my card was fraudulently used for like 200,000 yen of hotel charges recently. I think we can solve this. I've been spending the whole day contacting people about solving this, but wow. Wow, I feel like I've carried the egg of this video through a hurricane now. All throughout this, I have been carrying the warmth of not just this video, but also I'm hoping to do Cyber Souls Day in the morning tomorrow. I might cancel it if I'm really tired. Not cancel it, but reschedule it if I'm really tired after this. But yeah, funny. I wanted to put that life thing in there because, why not? This video's so long anyhow. Yeah, I have been not having the best of days, and yet the warmth of Tales of Kenzera ZAU has been with me throughout the whole process. So to sort of cut to the chase, this segment is going to have a lot of different stuff built into it, from world to characters to storytelling to the world building, a lot of the best stuff in the whole game. And I want to start off with the theme that I'm going to be tracing throughout the whole thing. Play my hand right now. I've been describing how the game is very outdoorsy. It's very fresh air. It's very deep breaths. It's not claustrophobic. It's not scary. It's not like isolation or anything like that. It's very rolling hills, mountains, that kind of thing. However, it has come to my attention rapidly that it is really dealing in dualities just about everywhere. I mean, it is a game about death, right? The whole thing with this game, to recap the story a little bit, is that the creator, Abubakar Salim, presented it at the Game Awards on a beautiful stage, mind you, that's based off of the Mask Pools, which is like the coolest main hub set piece of the world. The whole stage was purple and glowy and warm. It was like there's water rushing everywhere. It was magnificent, and he was in a very impressive black outfit that I think carried some of the mourning energy that was meant to be brought out, because he was pitching this as a game being made to mourn his father. If you've wandered into this somehow and didn't know that, it's an art project that was made to mourn, and that's the whole point. That is the whole point. That is what ZAU was going through, and that is what the main director was going through the whole time. So that's there. But then you do get into the game, and, you know, we're talking Metroidvanias here. We're talking dark castles, empty murder planets, crawling around with killer bugs and stuff. It doesn't feel the most dead. It doesn't feel the most dank or heavy or depressing. And yet I ultimately don't think that that discounts the heaviness or the darkness or the intensity of the story. So I'm going to be tracing a lot of how the warm life that I've been really talking up and the colder, harder, harsher grief feelings mix on many levels. So the biggest duality is that this is a framed narrative, as I've mentioned a couple times now, and you have Amani, which is the futuristic, maybe real world, and then you have Kenzera, which is taking place in fiction. Fiction that I think is based on a older, forgotten time period of Amani, because you do have things from the world of Kenzera, like the spears and masks, in the house that belongs to Zuberi and his family in Amani. So it may be like real world fantasy where, you know, the cities of the future have stories based in the long distant past, you know, fantasy, that kind of thing. But, you know, for the point of this, Amani is more real. Zuberi is a person. Kenzera is a fictional kind of fairy tale world in this game. In the world of Amani, all you have to explore is an apartment, and this is where the exposition takes place. This is basically the setup for the emotional background. Like, the entire game is a book. I think I've said that now. The entire game takes place inside of a book in Kenzera, but it's being read by a young man named Zuberi, who is struggling through the grieving process. And I didn't get a lot of this nuance the first time, but there is something that he is struggling to do that through the course of reading this book that his father was writing for him, he is able to face and do. This is not just a journey for the fictional, very similar character to him, ZAU. It is also, in the process of reading, a journey for Zuberi. So everything is very heavy all the time in Amani. It's beautiful. I love it. It's actually one of my absolute favorite parts of the game, because the apartment is just rendered in such detail. It's so alive. There's so many little things to sink into, and there's things to start catching for your second playthrough. Or, you know, once you're familiar with Kenzera, there are layers to be like, oh, I see how that inspired that. You can understand where the Metroidvania world, you can understand how that was inspired by what Zuberi's Baba was curious about, and what he was writing for his son to read, which I am largely going to spoil that kind of analysis in the big section. I will not spoil it here. Basically, there is not a lot of flip-flopping or anything. Once you get into Kenzera, it is fully, like, you get immersed into that. That's the whole thing. But, you know, right there and there, Kenzera feels a lot more alive and a lot more free and open than Amani, because you're going from an apartment to a whole region, I suppose, with various towns and stuff to explore. So once you get into the real game world, things feel very open, and it's like, okay, like, I think that's cool in its own way, right? Like, I think that deserves a lot of analysis. You can think about that for a long time and what that means. In a way, the game is a framed escape. There's an escapist story. It's not truly escapism. Well, I think most people who actually practice escapism a lot, or a lot of people who engage with escapism, are still processing their lives through the things that they're consuming. And in a way, this is a narrative about somebody doing that, where he is getting away from his real life issues through the Metroidvania story, but they are obviously very directly guiding him towards an actual process. So there's two parts to that. But again, it's another thing that makes Kenzera feel even less heavy, even less dark. And in all of the world and all of the parts of it, I don't think there are that many areas that do feel very dead, except for, and this is one of the big pieces, the villages. There are villages and towns all over, and you will pass through them pretty much every part of the map. Every main segment has one of these, where they're all abandoned. I mean, it's similar again to Imp of the Sun, where there's like 5 people here. Like, there's really not many. They could have populated some of them, but they didn't, and maybe it was just me not taking in all of the nuance my first time, but I didn't really get the full feeling of abandonment and isolation from this way that maybe I should have. Maybe that feeling will grow. But my first time, I was like, yeah, there's houses. That's cool. Once you go from caves and waterfalls to houses at all, it's like, oh yeah, we got some civilization here. It takes a minute for you to realize that there's no people in them. So it is exploring a desolate and fucked up area. Like, if you are immersing yourself in the story, it's like, oh, well, yeah, this place is abandoned. Like, in fictional world, I guess at this point we can speak from the point of the Kenzerian people. This is a desolate area. Like, we are referring to things from the past from ZAU's life, like places that his mom went, his dad has died, memories from before when he was here. There is nostalgia and there is emptiness, but it's an interesting atmosphere. Like, it is ultimately like a walk in the woods where you never once forget that you have heavy things on your mind, but you're not moping in your room. I mean, you're literally not, because you have the apartment with a built-in room in Amani, and we are not there, we're in Kenzera. So I think that play is interesting. If you're just speeding through the game and playing it, I could picture you being like, this game isn't even that dark. Like, this game doesn't even have that much desolation, isolation, abandonment, and all that stuff. But when you do stop and think about it, it's constantly presenting this area as being abandoned, but it doesn't feel heavy. And there we are. We've circled all the way back around to the initial point I brought up of balance? Mixture, but more than just, ooh, I have 2 things going on. There's a very specific feeling that it makes. This feeling really starts to come out when you look at the 3-part narrative. It presents itself as 4 acts, but without spoiling anything, I think the meat of the story takes place in the first 3, and they have a very similar formula. I think it reminds me of a folk tale, or maybe like a didactic story. Like, it reminds me of like multiple culture stories where you have this short, easy to remember narrative that kind of teaches you something, and there's these 3 parts in the middle that repeat. Like, you got Goldilocks with the 3 porridges, and the lesson is like balance, I think. You've got like Momotaro, where you've got like the 3 animals. You've got Okie Dokie, Unpheasant, and the monkey one. That's 2 references for 1. Hopefully you don't miss both of them. I just feel like there's a lot of times when in short, concise, but effective stories... Can somebody cite the Odyssey? Does the Odyssey have one of these trapped inside of it? I feel like repeating an idea 3 times can be very effective. And these 3 stories do have very similar elements where the point of the game is ZAU has summoned Kalunga, the god of death, because he's like, I know that if I bring you some people who are trying to hide from death, you'll give me my dad back. And Kalunga's like, regrettably, it is true. Whatever, let's go do it. So you're hunting for 3 very big spirits. They're more than people. They're like big spirits. They're a big part of this area. And you are trying to kind of get them to get ready to die. You're going out there. You can't accept that your dad died, but you're going to go find these monster people, spirits, and be like, it's time for you to die. But each story is more than just like yokai hunting. Like, you have a person to talk to. There is at least a human character in all of these stories, and you do form some degree of relationship with each of them as you meet them, and you work through a story that unfolds over a few little scenes, and it all culminates not just in the boss fight, but with an emotional connection to that boss. A feeling of, God, part of me wants to like say what the feeling is. No, I can't say the second one. That's just a pure spoiler. But there's a clear feeling that comes from it, and it's very raw and very beautiful. My main feeling was frustration in my first playthrough. The bosses, as I said, definitely had parts that got to me, but it may just have been that I was binging the game to get to the bosses, and my irritation was building anyhow. But the stories are very easy to remember. Like, they're cool, they're well written, they're punchy, like there's no wasted time. It's not too shallow, it's not too deep, it's just like boom, boom, boom. And they will tug at your heartstrings. Like, they are presented in a very nice fashion where they get increasingly, how do I say? Each one of them pulls you in, and then something gets a little bit twisty, and everybody has to process their feelings, essentially, which is, you know, on one hand, the warm feeling of meeting people, and then sometimes the cold of an unfortunate thing coming through from that experience. So in there, you get more of that dark coming through the warm, the cold coming through the light, that kind of thing. But as a 3-part narrative, it also has a bonus Metroidvania thing. I mentioned that the power-ups don't always feel that rewarding. Like, there are some good ones, some of them just feel a little bit gimmicky. It definitely doesn't really feel like that crazy Super Metroid, oh my god, I'm an unstoppable god now by the end, or the Hollow Knight thing, you know, once you have every spell and they all have the dark version and you have wings now and you're just a little god, fallen angel coming to bring justice to everybody. It's nothing like that. I mean, the biggest part of your moveset is just the basic good Sun and Moon gameplay, and you add like one solid thing onto that to get stronger. So you don't become a force of nature through your moves, but I think that there's things going on in the narrative here that I can't appreciate because I am a relative scrub when it comes to narratives. I'm mostly getting into narrative storytelling through very simplistic Metroidvania stories. I can say a few things about Metroidvania storytelling, but I can tell there's stuff here that I won't get for a few replays. But what I can say is that core feeling, that one obvious emotion that comes out and that drives the boss fight and the final twist, the final conclusion to your relationship with the character of the act, it brings ZAU up in the world, where the first one feels like you very naturally wander into it, and it's like, oh my, what have we gotten ourselves into? The second one, it's like, this is very unfortunate, but I am in the position to solve this. You feel like you're equals with the other character, and something dark happens, but you're here, you can make it better as well as you can. By the third one, it's like things are getting pretty crazy now. Like, this is quite the case we've wandered into, but I am a very big person too. You need me to deal with this giant force of nature? I can do that. When I think about it, the story does properly make you feel like you've grown, because the goal here isn't just to wrangle 3 souls, but ZAU wants to become a stronger shaman. Like, I'm not exactly sure if that's part of the deal, but he's like, Kalunga, look, I'm a really good shaman, and that helps things. And you feel that by the end for sure. You do feel that journey. It comes more in the narrative than the gameplay, which maybe is a bit of a theme for this game, but it's reductive to say that the only progression you feel comes in story, because this game's all about story and not gameplay. Like, that's not true. There's too much depth going on to just reduce it to that. And speaking of depth and nuance, I think it's time to just talk about ZAU as a protagonist right away. There's not enough really to pick apart Zubetti. Obviously, for numerous reasons, they are very similar characters. You just kind of shift from one into the other. And maybe that's just a reflection of the fact that we are going through Zubetti's process of relating to this protagonist to grow. It feels like you can kind of assume that there are some elements of ZAU's personality that are Zubetti's personality, but there's just not really a lot going on with the Amani frame of the story. So let's focus on ZAU. I actually wrote a scripted part for this because I think it's very nice. ZAU is a good fellow. He's definitely the most nuanced Metroidvania protagonist that I know, but he's also the most realistic. He isn't nuanced in the way that Death the Kid from Soul Eater is, with like 5 pages of lore and idiosyncrasies that make him who he is. He's just a human. He just has this kind of stubbornness and a young adult level of mixed inexperience and genuinely good wisdom now and again. He gets really mad, he gets profoundly sad, and he gets super powered sometimes, but he never stops being grounded, and that's one of the strengths of this game. He becomes a stronger shaman, and this is really just a vehicle for dealing with the feelings that he has about his deceased Baba. It's a grief game, but he also swears to drag him back from the realm of the dead through his deal with Kalunga, which is pretty over the top, and I'm pretty low-key into that. In fact, one of my favorite things is kind of just when this everyday stuff, this very human stuff, slice of life stuff, mixes in with the supernatural to show the vast power that human emotion has, and also let people have their journeys look as big and otherworldly as they feel inside them. So in a sense, the Tales of Kenzera stories might be right up my alley. Maybe that's why I want the series to continue so badly. Spoilers. Mostly though, he's young and he's very realistically realized, and it can feel funny comparing him in that way to the over-the-top glam rock personas like Soma fighting the familial demon reincarnation inside of him, or, you know, like Belmonts and all that stuff. You got all this crazy stuff going on in other games, but ZAU is just very human. I consider his hair to be among the cooler hairstyles in the genre, and a little bit out there. It's like, how do you keep that elevation in the back? But he's, I don't know, he's recognizable, he's cool, but he's just very fleshed out. That is really what defines him, is he's very fleshed out and human, and that is right at the beating heart of this whole thing, is that they have this ability to do dialogue and do choices with story moments over other things that they could be doing to really make things feel human, to show stumbling blocks, to show frustration, to show growth. It just has a texture on that makes them feel more real. The way that I always, in talking about Splatoon, am saying that Off the Hook is given a much more human level of nuance than the other idol groups. It feels like they are playing with the slider at this point, where some of them are vague concepts, some of them are basically tropes with nuance, and some of them are so realistic that you could hang out with them. ZAU is one of those people. He's really realistically brought to life, and no other character gets to be quite as fleshed out, but nobody is too simple either. It is a rule around the whole board that these characters feel pretty real, and that is a big strength. So at this point, I can't really keep the natural transitions coming because I have to zigzag around to like the masks again, but then the music, but then also the map, and also like some more narrative stuff and framing. Like I feel proud of myself for what I just did for the first part of the second half, but this is gonna feel a little bit more choppy now. Masks one more time. The masks are more than just what I described them as with the close combat and range. They are so cool. Like, I'm always about theming and stuff like that, and this is more than just theming, right? I've been talking about how I think this game is saying that it is very human to go through phases, to have warm phases and cold phases, to have moments when you want to run in the sunlight and have moments when you need to be down in a dark cave alone, moments where you're so confident and moments when you're just very upset and maybe trapped in cold, sad ways of thinking that are trapping you and hurting others. I mean, it's okay, and in fact encouraged in this game to move through both phases. And I was touching on this, but one more time, I in my personal feelings about the Sun and Moon line up really well with this whole setup in terms of gameplay, where warm stuff is very active, very frenetic, very in your face. I think of dancing and partying, like you get out there, that's sun energy. That's sun energy to me. So switching into the sun feels like that. I really can't quite do it justice, but this is where we start to scrape at the whole world building, the world building, and there are descriptions of what the sun spirit is like, and there are stories about every part of the sun and moon and the whole kit, and how these items came to be a part of the shaman's arsenal. And I think those continue to carry that same energy. They feel thematically on point. So you're not just switching to punch 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 mode, but you're switching to the warm punch 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 mode, but you're switching to like the outgoing, warm, upbeat sun energy when you switch to the sun mask, with the nuance of having a ranged move. As you get more mature, you have to sometimes step back. And then the moon is the same, but the opposite. I think the moon is very mental, it's very sentimental. It's more like, spending some time thinking or creating a video about a niche genre in your apartment alone on a nice cold October of the soul. Moon energy is more chill and mental and a little bit more reserved to me, and I think that lines up really well with how the moon spirit is presented here. And once again, the colors, everything comes together really well to feel like I am able to be myself when I'm playing. When I want to go in and really punch, punch, punch and be full of warm energy, I got that. When I need to go into my shell or step back and be a little bit more distant, I got that with the moon. And maybe I'm reading a bit too into it, because lots of other games have had two phases. In fact, I realized to my joy last night that I could always consider how ZAU would hang out with the Jack brothers from the Shin Megami Tensei Metroidvania, because they both have a game about switching between ice and fire to some degree. Although it is funny, actually. I think those personalities are completely reversed. I think that's actually really charming. I think Jack Frost plays a lot more like the Sun Mask, and Jack-o'-lantern, or what is his name, Lantern Jack? Pyro Jack? Depends on the localization, I think. He's more reserved in fire. That is art. That is the human experience. But seriously, I think being able to put yourself in his shoes through the story, through the world that you want to get in there and touch, through the gameplay that's really fun, through the combat chain combo system, deep action sensibilities that the game has, you can really get in there and stay in there. And I think that's again just why it's frustrating to run into annoying things. And the sun and moon is a huge part of that. If you want to get up there and be hot and fiery, do that. If you want to sink back and be cool and shooty, you do that. I think that goes a really long way. In the game itself, going through the worlds, very natural transition, is also doing that. I've mentioned it numerous times now, but you are bouncing back and forth. There are some things like the swamp that are a little bit more like, it's outdoors, but it's not super vibrant. But no, there's plenty of caves. Caves are a very big part of this game's design. They really are just biomes, almost like Kirby biomes, like volcano, desert, swamp, mountain. Very, very naturey, but there's always the caves, and the caves just look beautiful. I gushed about the waterfalls. Freezing the water feels absolutely incredible, and that is just like they have this sense for the sparkles and everything. So the caves aren't just dark, they're magical and reflective. And in the beginning, you have a strong character moment inside the caves. Going forward, does that keep up? I'm not exactly so sure, but if you were to say that there's feelings of triumph when you're out in the sun, and reflection and sensitivity and sentimentality when you're in the caves, I don't think you're far off there. I think taking that kind of reading to the game might be fruitful, and being able to apply lenses and readings and ways of thinking to a game like this and get anything out of it is really satisfying. You can't say that about every game, so I really commend it there. How those different areas come together, though, is a little bit of a different story. Again, you're moving through phases and biomes and story beats, and it's all very natural. You don't have to think very much. That's great. But it also means that you're living in the moment so much that you kind of just drive around in a big, meaningless triangle. Like, if you're just driving for sightseeing or going where your gut takes you, you'll have a great time, but then you look at your route and you're like, I'm never doing that route ever again. Like, why would I ever drive from the golf course to the ice cream place using those roads? Those are stupid roads. I would never do them. To the game's credit, there is a fast travel system that gets put in pretty decent amount of places, and it's charming. It has these little Korok things that I think if I were given just a little bit more time to bond with them, I might have been charmed. Like, they were just there, like, love me, I'm so wholesome, and I didn't really have much of a time to connect with them, but they're there, and if you talk to them, what are they, the Yumbos? If you talk to the Yumbos, I think Swahili actually has consistent vowels, so if Kalunga is Lunga, then I think they're Yumbos. If you want to hang out with the Yumbos, they're there, and you can warp around to backtrack. But what does this add to the game? I don't know how many people are going to go for 100%. I was fine. I was built just enough to get to the end, but I did realize while reconsidering everything that due to getting your skill points partially through hitting enemies, and the enemies do respawn in many areas, I'm pretty damn sure, you can grind. You can get not just better at the game, but also get some skill points if you're struggling with a boss and you go through the Yumbo gate to some part of the map with some stuff left to explore. You could get some skill points going. I am pretty damn sure it's possible to grind in this game. I never did, but after Momodora 2, I don't sleep on how much that can add to a game. Any resource management at all, any choice and any incentive for fighting enemies, it goes a really long way for replays and for divergent game experiences. I think that's not to be slept on. However, I think you would have to be like, I made a promise to myself to 100% this game, or I'm so immersed that I don't want this to end. That's understandable. Or I can't beat the boss, so I'm gonna go do some other stuff first in order to actually go out of your way to get things. I mentioned the IOU for the badges, or like the game modifier charms. It's true that could also be actually that's a very direct reason to go grind. If you are struggling with a boss, you could absolutely go do some of the parkour challenges that you skipped earlier to get some charms, and maybe they will help. And that would be a reason to backtrack. So there are reasons, but it's just not physically structured in a very appealing way. You have this one lump for the plateau that the first act takes place in. You have the swamp and forest for the second act, and then you have the volcano desert growing out of that. And it's kind of like a big dick, like a very weird dick. You have kind of like these two lumps that are connected, and then one long protrusion that's not connected back to them. They do all grow from the same, what is that gland? Can I get this specific? That's anatomy. That's not sexual. That's anatomy. There is a good central hub in the middle that's very satisfying and easy to pass through over and over again, but it's like, I know this game does open up doors. It does give you shortcuts to backtrack, but does it matter? I think maybe there's a couple times per biome or like proper act region where you can use it to save some backtracking. It might help you get from like Act 3 to Act 2, but it's like, I looked at the map and it's just so rare that it's gonna help you. You're basically just warping around with the Yumbo gates to get to these areas and then just, I don't know, just go off and get the thing that you're missing and come back. Like, it's not gonna lead you to things. It doesn't have boweling. You're not gonna like go through a shortcut and be in a new area. You're not gonna get wandered around. Like, it really is not so fun to backtrack, in my opinion, which is a direct cause of it's a direct effect of the adventure style. You know, you're walking, you're never stopping. It causes this. Ijo desu. that is all that I will say about the map. I think that kind of just speaks for itself at that point. It's just not made for backtracking. It's made for adventuring, and I can't possibly say that any more times in this video before you start to get mad. So we are arriving at the point where it is nothing but bangers from now on. Like, that other Section 2 stuff, that wasn't boring or anything. I liked that. It wasn't even bad. Like, that was just like the world, the heart, tracing this theme all around. It was good stuff, but this is great stuff. If you press pause, which I often forget, it's select, it's not start. Start is like just for going home. If you press select, that codex or whatever is incredible. This is where you have stuff going on, and I understand that people might not want to be told, oh, the best parts of the game are in the pause menus, but it's like a $13 game now or whatever, and holy shit, like, if you have any interest in the genre, you've got to check out how seriously they take the world building in this game. This is one thing where I think other people have this covered. Like, I am really, in the end, more of like a thematic and nitty-gritty kind of reviewer at this point. I do like music, though. I do like music. But you have descriptions for every enemy. There's like 7 or whatever, but you can view their designs up close, and it is way easier to appreciate them in the menu than it is in the actual game, which is a little bit of a disappointment. You have the ability to listen to such long voice-acted stories every time you unlock an Echo, I think it's called. They're Echo Stones or something, where you have just like a story. Maybe it's the narrator's voice most of the time talking about ZAU and Kalunga's journey. But I want to say sometimes it's just stories about the area. One way or another, you can get stories about wherever you are, whether it comes out from the main characters talking or somewhere in a menu. As I said, every upgrade has its own story, and there's beautiful art to go with them too, so you can just immerse your ass into this. They have cool art to show off every act as you're going through it. There's like an act menu for some reason. There's character portraits with descriptions that I believe update as you play the game and learn more about them. You can just really, like, if you want a hit of Kenzera, you just open up that menu and it's there. I don't even think I need to talk about how much that adds to the whole experience. You know, it's just, you can take it more seriously. It's deeper. It's all right there. It's for the taking and it's yours. It's just rich. It is now time to talk about the music of this game. I did not know that this game had good music until a couple days ago. When I think about this game, or when I thought about this game, I didn't think about the music. If there was one thing, not the sun and moon, humans are dark and cold, also happy thing, not the lore for every little Halo grunt that you have to punch until he blows up. If there's one thing that was sneakily immersing me into this game, it's that goddamn soundtrack. I think it comes from the creator being like a film score person. It's just so subtle and so powerful. I've been on a quest to find soundtracks I like that aren't super melodic, that are just kind of ambient, and this isn't always ambient, but it just does that job that I'm just, you know, throwing a dart at a board must be the film scoring job of inobtrusively filling the whole game with so much energy. It's incredible stuff. I literally wasn't aware of how much it was bringing me into this experience until I listened to it in isolation. I was like, do you think the soundtrack is on Spotify? And it was. And now I'm probably in like a top % listener position because people are sleeping on this amazing soundtrack for some reason. There are tracks that sound like you would expect for like an adventure-y outdoorsy game. The instrumentation goes nuts. There's so many different kinds of instruments in here, but you'll get like flutes and drums and that sort of thing and strings for a more adventure-y, like open nature-y segment. But it's got range. It's got that range, and that's why I'm going nuts about this theme here of 2 parts, is because you will randomly get a track that is pure Metroid. Like, you will have these very human parts where it's like a hand drum and the rhythm's a little bit sporadic and energetic, and then you've got like a hard electronic percussion thing that is just like not dropping any beats and firmly establishing a track for getting down to business and searching and exploring. Just a straight up Metroidvania banger. And it's very natural how you move between these sounds, and that's when you realize that there is an element of darkness and grit to everything. Even if it's triumphant, even if it's just like a breath of fresh air, there is always that little darkness and that little edge and that little coldness. There's always that coldness. Like, the person who composed this understood the assignment masterfully. Like, the sense of life as a balance of warmth and also cold is magical. It is incredible, and there is not one place where this comes out more strongly than the vocal performances. Holy shit, this is the single best use of vocals in any Metroidvania. Like, I didn't even plan to say that when I came in here. I just realized that's how I felt because I turn on these songs to cope now. Like, oh my god. Like, if you're going through, go to the Spotify and click on every fucking song that has a feature, and that will blow your ass out of the water. Like, holy crap. They were being directed so well, or maybe everybody individually brought their own personal trauma when they decided to record. Every vocalist seems to be different because they're always credited as a feature, but they are filling themselves with this emotion that is so profound. It is so alive. Like, I just get chills. It is top of the line stuff. Any track that has a vocal is one of those things that is stitching you into this game. It is just stitching you straight in. I am like taken aback by how much that one element in a really otherwise solid soundtrack does to just nail home that feeling of grief. Like, you know, yeah, it's a game where you run around outside and shoot lasers on enemies, but like, it is sad. It is sad. Like, you're never escaping that. And that is what we were expecting going into this. And that is what we fucking got. But it's not moping. It's sad, but it's not moping. It's an active game. It's a productive game. It's a positive game. It's a really healing game. It is so fucking alive. Like, I can't put it any other way. It is rich. It is made by artists. It is full of really, really good shit. And it's sometimes about pushing block puzzles around, but holy crap, you're gonna feel good when you're doing it. Drop the mic. So yeah, I just had to sit and listen to some more of the vocal tracks for energy before I finish this. So we're reaching the end of what I can tell you before I have to tell people who haven't played the game to leave. I will do a proper wrap-up at the end, and you can skip to that with the timestamp that is just sparkling and pulsating on screen right now. The last little tidbit that I forgot to say is that I really like how inobtrusive the dialogue is, even though it's like live dialogue during action. They nailed it. They did the Kid Icarus thing. I think if there's another benefit to having a lot of running in this game and doing stuff that doesn't take a lot of thinking, it's that it's really, really easy to focus on the dialogue, and hey, that's a decent compromise to make. I like it in Gunvolt, the Azure Striker Gunvolt games. I like it, but there's a lot of dialogue that I miss. It's a very fast-paced game. But yeah, that is literally it. So if you watch past this point, you're gonna get spoil sauced. Your first playthrough isn't gonna make any damn sense. You're gonna miss out on a big spoiler, and you're gonna be sad. You're gonna say, fuck you, Melovania, you're one of the worst YouTubers. So I warned you. Just straight up poisonous neon animal gonna kill your first run if you keep listening. I couldn't possibly be any more blunt. Do not come any closer. Okay, now it's the spoiler section. So Kalunga is Baba. And I still am rolling that around in my head because there's a few things here. There is a change in who is writing at the end of the game. I think this is basically just the segment for me talking about the second Amani part. I said in the non-spoiler section that Amani doesn't have a lot going on, and it's true. It only has 2 parts going on, and they're really fucking important. They're not like active parts of the story at all times, but they are that extra thing. They're the ringing of the bell above the fair, you know? There's all this activity going on in Kenzera, and there's all this growing that ZAU is doing, but the just simple start and finish to the Amani stuff is amazing. I saw that, I forget where I saw this. I mean, I do follow the creators on Twitter. I saw that they used, unless I had a dream, I saw that they used an actual video of walking into a room with a casket to capture the scope and the scale for everything to make that scene when you go to see Baba more well realized. And I was impressed by the framing of that scene. What is it? You must be seeing things through Zubedi's eyes, right? Because I'm just picturing the scene again. Maybe it's like a really tight over the shoulder view, but it's imposing. It's really impressive. yeah, just the weight of that and the dialogue is triumphant, and what more can I say? But I will gush more about that whole sequence because you have, again, all this optional depth, and one of my absolute favorite parts of the game, maybe you could guess at this point, is that you can go up to the rooms. Maybe it's just Zubetti's room, but you can go back to Zubetti's room, and I feel like they really capture the energy of like a college kid, kind of. Like, there's still a lot of that cute, youthful stuff. Like, there's no reason to, just cut and burn all the stuff that you grew up with out of your room just because you're 19 now or whatever. Like, there's a lot of stuff from when he was growing up still there, but it does feel like he's kind of grown out of it in a way, and he's coming back. I don't think we know much about if he lives at home or if he is still like a high schooler or something. I genuinely don't know. But oh my god, there's just so many little things to just take in. That have just made Amani so well realized, and every single thing. Talk about a good game for having an optional walk speed toggle. The fact you can go slowly through all of this is just completely essential. Like, imagine if you had to walk with like an awkward Pokemon Sword and Shield, like, instant jog. Sorry if I randomly shat on Swish for no reason, but I'm pretty sure you just walk straight into a 1-speed jaunt when you press the controller in that game. Sun and Moon, I think you can walk slowly. That's not the point. Imagine if you had to just like sprint around the room as if you're in a hurry, That'd be fucking awful. But there's a lot to the house. I was hinting at it in the non-spoiler section, but you do catch that there are paintings on the wall of the sun and moon spirits, at least as they are presented in the comic book. The comic book itself being, I'm pretty sure, a memory of Zubetti and like IRL Baba, like Amani Baba. I believe that's real, which it hit me on the B-roll replay. Means that he was writing a story. I didn't remember that he was writing the story for ZAU specifically once he knew he was gonna die. Like, I forgot that, and holy depth. I mean, it's literally like you can go through this game multiple times with a few different lenses just based on what you know. Like, there's just the simple Kalunga is Baba, which we haven't even talked about yet, and then there's just the fact that this was made for Zubetti. This was made for him. He doesn't just relate. This is made for him. And Baba gave ZAU the masks because that was a point that they connected with. That was something that they enjoyed together based on the comic. I'm not gonna make myself cry. It's too late at night. I noticed stuff like the spears. I'm pretty sure the sun spears were on like the mantle in the living room, which again makes me think of them as a historical artifact in Amani. At this point, I'm just not picking apart. At this point, I'm just savoring, running my fingers over the world building. But it's all building to saying, man, just what a powerful thing, They have these scenes, right? They have these moments in the tiny Amani moments where you overlook the city. I think that's amazing for setting, like, whoa, just, pulling you into this game. Then you have opening the book is very strong, especially once you understand on your second playthrough who wrote the book and why. Seeing those things where you go in is really good, but seeing the casket, I mean, after you take in everything and build up your emotional your emotional sensitivity and your sentimentality, and then you walk in and have the conversation, it's just devastating. It's so powerful. And then the author changes. And this is the point where, one last IOU for the road, I do think I might be a little confused, or at least I have multiple theories. So Zubetti is writing his own ending for ZAU at this point. So was it his choice? Was it his choice to make Kalunga Baba? Because there's that reading where he's like, no, fuck it, just let ZAU get to see his Baba. Like, why not? Did he realize while he was reading his dad's book that his dad was already writing this ending? That's maybe the most interesting ending possibility is I'm listening to Kalunga dialogue. I mean, I've already caught some things like, you're doing this for your Baba. Well, I'll tell you right fucking now, he's not happy about the way you're going about things. Like when ZAU has the breakdown about the bridge. Yeah, I was like, okay, well, that obviously hits differently when you're seeing it that way. Whether or not that's how the dad was writing it, I don't know. If there are hints as you go throughout that the dad was writing the story this way for his son, that's really cool. Like, that is genuinely one of my favorite little narrative things. I don't know otherwise. Like, it might have been Zubedi's idea. It might have been his dad's idea. I don't know. I think I'm less interested in him just changing the ending to be like, you know, happy ending than I would be in the other one, because it's a little bit like wishful thinking. In fact, it almost feels too much like, fuck it, I'm just gonna give this fictional version of me the happy ending that I wish I could have. Although there are other ways to go about that. Like, you could write that ZAU completes his mission and Kalunga gives Baba back. You could do that. It was his choice not to bring back Baba the soul in a separate version from Kalunga. It was his choice to go through with the transformation. There's a lot there. I think I'm pretty much just spitballing out loud, but I hope you can hear how cool I think this is. It did take me out, but my genuine first thought was, how the fuck did he not notice? Is it a different old man visage? Like, we never see a Baba for understandable reasons, but we never see what he looks like. So if he looked the same, you know, as the family is writing this book, you know, Baba and then Zubedi, you have to at least consider the immersion for the readers. Like, what's up with the faces? You know, what's up with the faces? Why does ZAU not recognize him? Does he look different? And why does he not, like, I don't know, like, wouldn't he, like, transform and show the original Baba look when Zubedi writes that ending? I am confused about that. I'm not saying, like, cinema sins, but that was my genuine first reaction, is like, how did you not notice that you brought your father back? It's obviously just a really powerful little thing there. I don't know what I believe. I don't know what I believe about it, but it is very, very sweet that one way or another, it was somebody's idea that the whole journey was a final journey between father and son, when the son didn't fucking know it. And the father was able to say things that he wouldn't be able to say otherwise. He wouldn't be able to say, like, you're a dumb sack of sticks, like, get tougher. Like, he wouldn't get the chance to say that. And I will play I watched the Abu Bakr Salim video card, because holy crap, go check out that video if you haven't. I guess I gotta put the link here now. He made a powerful video, just a sobering video about what this is all about before dropping it. And he mentioned numerous times, at least if not in that, in other videos, about how stern, like, he characterized his Baba as stern, the IRL Baba, as stern but caring. And yeah, fuck, that's Kalunga. I did sometimes think, like, man, this is a lot of game to be giving to this random guiding old man. And there were moments where I really liked Kalunga, like where he softens and listens to ZAU during the fight in the swamp and the forest, where ZAU says something so well written about just like how he's like, you know what, I'm mad at you, I'm mad at death, I'm mad that this is happening. And just thinking that he was the legit Kalunga, I was like, ooh, like, that's cool that the god of death can learn about the depths of pain that he causes for the mortals. Like, you know, keep yourself refreshed on what you are doing as a guardian spirit of some kind, you know. And the fact that ZAU could actually get through to him in that way was pretty damn cool. But now I suppose that would all look a little bit different. I guess it depends, though. Like, you could say that two versions of the story exist. If we don't know if the Baba shift was Baba or Zubedi's idea, then there is a reality where this was written to be Baba writing a third-party character, Kalunga, to be a part of his son's grieving. There is also the reality where it was always intentional. I guess every single piece of dialogue in this game has two readings now, and that is juicy. Aside from that, other story stuff, the first story I feel like is very archetypical. It sets up like, here's the person, you have a bond with them. Oh no, crazy destiny, right? The second one is very interesting. Maybe it's my favorite. There was just something in the character design. Maybe it's because I like her. I guess I like dangerous and sad looking characters for whatever reason at this part of my life. But I kind of vibed with the girl that they meet, and maybe I was slightly suspicious, maybe I wasn't, but she's betraying them. That's crazy. That's a really crazy way to pull it. And you don't even have to focus on that. They have a separate interesting arc with the argument, and then it's just like, whoops, sorry. Yeah, again, just like the portrayal of ZAU's determination is stronger there than almost anywhere, because he's not even just like cosmically fighting the gods. He's like, no, fuck you, Kalunga, stop talking to me. Like, he's defying the gods right now, here and now. Like, he is actively defying the gods, and he's like, no, we are doing this my way, my way. Yeah, I thought that was very powerful. Cool characterization and all. And then they just pull the rug out from under you. Like, shit. It's an awful world, but having resolved that, you do feel very grown up when you get to the third one, which I think I was the least invested in, but at that point it really was like, we are strong, we are at the end of the journey, I'm gonna go get your son, but like, I don't have time to get invested in you. Like, we saw a kid become a bird, we got betrayed by this nice looking girl, and then now you're whatever. There was something that happened wrong with the storytelling for me there, though, where there was a moment where it was like, holy shit, it's the dad's necklace. And I'm like, oh, so the dad died? So, like, the son killed the dad? I had to look at my map and be like, no, the dad is standing down there on the condition that this is what major character icons look like on the map. I couldn't tell anymore. I was like, did a story beat just happen? But it didn't. I think it was cool. I think it was cool that it was like, oh, something bad happened to your son. He's fucking dead. All things look bad. He's fucking dead. Oh, it's really bad. Yeah, he became a volcano spirit. No notes, that was fine. And yeah, with the final Baba fight, beautiful sequence. It didn't have to be long. It didn't have to be long and arduous. I think the scene in the apartment was such an emotional climax, and I was so invested. I put so much emotional energy into that, and I got so much payment out of it, and I did enough game at that point that I didn't need there to be some final gauntlet of challenges in the fourth act. I was happy to just get that last bit of powerful catharsis and then move on and be done with it with one last challenge, just literally being the boss fight, which was like, you know, by design pretty good, very powerful, because it's right when they hit you with the reveal, and it's called Baba but it's Kalunga, and yeah, he brings all the moves back from the old enemies. It was good. There was maybe the most notable jank with the vertical platforms in the Kalunga fight, but I didn't give a shit, because at that point my heart was just completely in tune with what was going on. And it worked. I might have had an awkward ending if they did stretch a little bit too many block puzzles and switch flipping puzzles into the finale, and ultimately kind of give me an awkward feeling while I'm holding like a tray of filet mignon of grief. But the way that it went, it was easy, and I was very happy with how it ended. It was maybe a bit sudden, but it worked for me. I could see people calling it sudden, but I was happy with it. And that's pretty much it for spoilers, so let's go let everybody back in, huh? So, in conclusion, I really want more. I barely even talked about it, but all of that world building and all of the awkward stumbling blocks, so to speak, of this game's design just mean that, like, I think overall things are trending upwards. Like, if things can keep going with this franchise, they're gonna go somewhere really cool, so I'm keeping an eye on it. I hope that everything is okay, considering the price cuts and a lot of the studio had to be let go, but I don't know how things like that work, to be honest. At the end of the day, I do really like this game a lot. What I like about it vastly outweighs what annoys me, and I have it in like my B tier with like aspirations of B+. Like, it's very powerful, it's very empowering and stuff. It's maybe lacking a little bit of that personal connection that would slip it up a bit to like B+, but that's just in my heart. I would say, if you're putting it into the larger scale of Metroidvanias overall, anywhere in the B tier is fine. Like, I could see really like, you know, ragging on it for its issues, bringing it down to B-. I could see some people saying it's B+, especially because it is trying to be something and it is pushing boundaries right now. It depends what you value. I would not say that it's like a C tier game in any way. Like, there are elements that are C tier, but the way that it all comes together is way too powerful, way too harmonious. It's way too effective at making you feel things. It's too good of a piece of art. And even if you say that like some of the most important Metroidvania things aren't its strengths, I still think it's wonderful because all the other strengths gas those up. I'm fine with people disagreeing with me on that, but you really have to have a respect for what's good about it and how much this genre needs what's good about it before you kind of hurry to, hand wave it. Basically, I think what I was hoping for more or less came true. Like, it is a game that prioritizes narrative and takes the genre seriously. However, it isn't exactly what I wanted. On one hand, I've always just wanted to play a really good Metroidvania about exploring the psyche. I'm sure it's out there. If it hasn't been made yet, it'll be made soon. Just the idea of putting a Metroidvania in the mental plane, it's not that crazy. I'm not going to copyright it. I will still make a Metroidvania like that someday, even if other people do. It's a great idea. My one thing is that I thought this was going to be about putting yourself back together after trauma, and it's really not. It's really not. It's maybe about picking yourself up, but like I literally, like I mentioned in my reaction video, like Dread is about putting yourself back together piece by piece. Like fucking Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas. Your limbs are scattered everywhere and you have to put them back on. That's how I feel about Metroidvanias, and this game had the potential to set up ZAU as a previously established, very powerful shaman, and then he loses all of his powers, but they didn't do that. It very much is a coming-of-age, young, hopeful, inexperienced, but promising shaman, gets strong and fulfills his wish. It could have been a story of losing yourself vis-a-vis losing all your powers, but it wasn't that, which is definitely a bit of a bummer, but it's good with what it is. It's uplifting, and so many pieces come together to make you feel it. It's human, it's warm, it's inspiring while carrying that darkness in it, and it's like hitting a stride when you're going through it. You're just going through a shit time, but you have that warmth in your chest, and you're like, this is my stride, I'm gonna keep moving. If I can gas up stuff like Johanne the Parhelion for being like decently creative and pretty well put together despite not really pushing boundaries very much, then I feel like I kind of owe it to this game to also gas it up, because while it is more mixed with like some legitimate not so great parts, it's trying to be so much more, and it's really pushing things, and it's, at least for me, completely established that there is a huge place for the Adventurevanias. People are gonna hate me for adding another subgenre, but the adventure-y flavored ones like Ori, I get it. I get why people like them. They're a little bit offbeat, but they're powerful and they're wonderful, and it's been really fun working on analyzing them and understanding them, because they're different and they will let you down if you don't appreciate the benefits of what comes from their difference. But I've talked for 2 hours about this, so you don't need me to repeat the same idea. God, at this point, I'm just smoke and fog at this point, but I've been imagining what ZAU and Zubetti's relationship with animals is like, because I can't help but think about how this game's cake kind of got eaten by Animal Well. I mean, it fucking sucks. Like, to get released as a Metroidvania like 13 days or whatever before Animal Well, that sucks. Like, even I had my attention pulled away from this game. I was pretty into it, and I was busy. I was very busy, but I was busy. I was trying to still process Luna Nights, and then ZAU came out, and I'm like, all right, I got time. And then Animal Well came out, and I'm like, I couldn't possibly have time for this, but it just had so much aura on day one that I was like, I have time. But I think that's kind of what I mean to say in my finale here is this game has aura. Like, this game has a strong aura. I think that's why it has haters, because it has meaning. It is made with heart. It is made with skill. It's just like, how do you say? It's like a really charismatic, really likable, very talented, but fundamentally a bit rusty member of a team, or maybe like a new pro player or something in a sport, who everybody's like, you're gonna go far, kid, but people are like, oh, you're not ready yet, you're not ready for the big leagues. Like, there are elements where people are gonna be like, this isn't good enough to call great, but for me, the great elements are so great that it has that aura. Like, it's going places, it has the sauce, it has what it takes, and regardless of what happens with the series, I will always be taking care of it. I will always have it in my analysis of this genre. I'm so glad. I mean, it's kind of my Ori in a way. It's kind of splitting that duty, because I don't play the Ori games. I just don't really have an interest. And I get it now. I get a lot more of it now, and I want to keep playing more Ori-like games. And this is one of my very first ones, and it's grand, and it hits a feeling that is still Metroidvania, still grief, still processing, still very, very moody, but so fresh, so lush, and it's always going to have some real estate for that. And it made a really cool story, didn't it?